Garrett, Haake, I'm going to start with you. I thought yesterday when people were talking about how Rob Portman was one of the serious legislators, that people were still missing the point. The Republican Party has willingly been kidnapped, hijacked, whatever word you want to use, by Donald Trump and his kids, because Trump can't speak anymore. He's been basically deplatformed, and they are still either agree with his incitement of an insurrection or they're afraid of him. There is no C.
Well, look, I've described it as a bad breakup with someone who can't get over their toxic ex. You know, they keep checking the former president's social media. They're looking over their shoulders. They're wondering if it's really over this time. And I think that's is part of the process here. I mean, look, Portman, interestingly enough, was not one of the 5 senators who affirmatively said, we know this is constitutional, we're ready to move forward today. If I'm Donald Trump's defense attorneys, today's vote in the Senate was about as good as you could hope for. It shows that the impeachment managers are going to come into the Senate in 2 weeks having to prove not only that Donald Trump is guilty of what they say he's guilty of, but that it's even a worthwhile exercise to be there at all. So a pretty tough start for the managers today, but not. I think we should be clear. You know, I talked to a couple of Republican senators after this vote. So did other members of our team up here today. And even those who voted with Rand Paul on this point of order, the idea that they shouldn't be doing this, said, we know this will be relitigated. We're not sold yet. So this doesn't slam the door on the impeachment manager's case. But, boy, it makes it a lot harder.
You know, Nick Confessore, I think that is a straight-on way to look at it. I think another way to consider how this contributes to our understanding of the people in charge of, among other things, securing the Capitol. I mean, all of what's so interesting about the Capitol Police and the sergeants at arms is they report up to members. And I wonder if the investigative journalism that your newspaper is involved in, that Garrett Haake is involved in, will make abundantly clear that a fair trial in the sort of the traditional sense can't be had, but we may learn of enablers, of co-conspirators, and at the end of the day, these were all would-be victims of the insurrection. I think we have to widen the lens of what we're going to be watching over the next few weeks in the Senate.
Well, look, Nicolle, I think the key thing here is that this was a vote to put heads in the sand. It was a vote to avoid this discussion on a technicality, on a side discussion, because to confront the underlying issue is much more sensitive and damaging for Republican senators. The underlying issue is, did and how and in what way did a sitting president of the U.S. incite a mob to invade the Capitol and prevent his successor from being installed as president? That's what the trial is going to be about. And to your point, Nicolle, we see already people who have been arrested in this riot are mounting a Trump told me to do it defense. They are telling investigators or cops that essentially Trump told them to do it. They saw his messages, they heard from him, and they believe that they were following his orders. This is partly an effort to take some culpability just away from the rioters themselves, but it also points to the problem for the president. These are people who were saying they took inspiration from him, they heard his words, they marched to the Capitol and banged on the doors, and violence and destruction was the result.
You know, Garrett, I wonder, we always look at this again through the political lens. I wonder what the personal dynamics are. Do any of them feel bad that 2 Capitol police officers died? Do any of them feel culpable? Do any of them seem determined to get to the bottom of it? They act in a way that doesn't suggest they have a burning curiosity to understand what happened. Or do they all know that Trump incited it and they saw these people around there on the 5th, and so it's not a mystery to them?
It's a dangerous business for me to try to look inside of the hearts of so many of these elected officials. But I can say I think you will see an effort to get to the bottom of it where it's politically convenient to do so. I mean, investigations into Capitol Police failures, for example, is something that, these lawmakers know how to do, and it's the kind of things that they can, get up the next day and feel good about reforming. I mean, looking back over the last several years of watching, really when he was candidate Trump in 2015, watching the kind of rhetoric that all of these politicians who have stayed with this president have had to first sort of tepidly back away from and then sort of endorse and then just pretend like they don't hear anymore is the kind of self-reflection that elected officials are not typically very good at. I don't have high hopes in my professional capacity here for a ton of self-reflection here. The other reality here is, we talk a lot about these folks who are afraid of Trump, afraid of the tweet, afraid of the reaction from him. There's a fear in a couple of different ways now of the Trump voter that I don't think we talk about quite as much. These are their neighbors. These are people folks know when they go back home. Sometimes they are actually afraid of them, and sometimes this is the world they live in and who they're surrounded by when they're not surrounded by me and my colleagues up on the Capitol. And I think all that context is important to understanding how Republican lawmakers look at these moments.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.